So are you in the market for a car that's fun and sporty? Are you looking for something that is going to fulfill your needs as a midlife crisis guy just cresting the age of 50? Well, the ND Mazda Miata could be the perfect car for you, because not only is it thrilling and provides you with top-down motoring experiences, but it isn't all that expensive and it's pretty reliable. Screw that. So you guys now join me from behind the wheel of Vanessa, my 1986 Porsche 944. For those of you that have been following the channel since we started in 2016, you'd know that I bought this car 2 years ago as a total pile, and it's been my restoration project. I've been bringing her back to life, and I absolutely adore this thing. But today what we're doing is comparing a 35-year-old sports car with one that was built just a few years ago to see what the biggest differences have been over the years in sports car development. How do they drive similarly? What are the biggest differences? That's what we're going to find out today. I'm not going to suggest that this 944 is better than a Miata, because there are just too many factors, too many differences between them. So let's start off with how this thing drives. That's all that really matters with a sports car. I'm going down this back road right now, and the one thing I'll say about this 944 is, for a 30-year-old car, it drives so unbelievably well. This thing is ridiculously nimble. It only weighs 2,600 pounds, and for a car that's essentially made of pig iron, that's really not that bad. The whole car is galvanized, so it shouldn't rust, and that just means that when you're going down these roads, you can be using this thing as an all-weather car. You can use this thing every day. You got a hard top, and this car really was meant to be driven. Now, the steering on this 944 is honestly one of my favorite things about the whole car. This has hydraulic power steering. You could get the very early ones with a manual rack, but the way that this steering just responds and communicates things to you that are going on the road is insane. If I run over a pebble or an ant or a micron, the steering wheel will twitch just a teeny bit. I know exactly what's going on the road surface. It is so communicative, and what that means is when I'm going down a back road and I'm pushing it hard, I always know exactly what's going on. I know what sort of situation I'm putting the car in. It communicates everything to me, and it just makes the driving experience so alive. Yeah, on center, it may not be the dartiest car out there. Modern cars with electric power steering have very, very good on-center response, but once you pick your line and pitch this car through a turn, it just holds on. And the other thing about this car is it feels heavier than it is going through a turn, and that's not a bad thing at all. What I mean by that is it feels very, very stuck to the road, like someone glued it there. And there's no roll in the suspension at all. I have Coney yellows on this car, and that helps a lot. They're fully adjustable, and the way I have it set up, this thing has no roll. I have a 25mm sway bar up front, so this thing is just an absolute animal in the turns. Now, I'm pulling out onto a straight. I'm giving it the beans, 3,000 RPM, 4,000. There's 5 grand. It's moving. That got me up to 50. It's not super fast in a straight line because, I mean, A, it's a 2.5 liter Porsche developed 4-cylinder that develops 150 horsepower and 137 pound-feet of torque. And that's not super impressive if you think about it. But like I said, 2,600 pound car, that's only 300 more than what the Miata weighs. And this thing absolutely does the job as a momentum car. Yeah, you're not gonna be gunning it against Mustangs and giving people the finger as you fly by at high speed. You're not gonna be able to show off like that. But when you get to a back road and you're carrying speed through these turns, this chassis is so unbelievably dynamic and so well tuned that you don't even care. You can just plop it in third gear, keep it in the meat of the power band between 3,000 and 5,000 RPM, and I've had people in modern Mustang GTs. I have a bunch of friends whenever we're on back roads, and I mean, my friends are probably gonna get on my ass and they'll probably drop a comment, but this thing leaves them because it handles it's just unbelievable how well this car handles. Now, yeah, the Miata, when you're going through turns, it's nice, flickable, and you can really just have fun with it at the limit, but this car has much higher limits than the Miata does. And a lot of that is due to tires and suspension setup, because this car is I'm running 235 square right now, and yeah, I could run something a bit wider, But what it does is gives me the perfect combination of awesome grip, but also just enough looseness at the limit so I can have fun with it and get that communication that I'm looking for from the chassis. And that's what makes this car just an unbelievably good time to drive. Now, what I was saying earlier about it being relatively dailyable, I mean, that is true. It's a hardtop car. It has 4 seats, except for unless you've severed your lower appendages, you're not getting in the back of this thing. It does have a Targa roof that you can pop off if you're trying for some sunshine, trying to get a little suntan while you're going on your cruise. But I pretty much just never open it because it leaks like a sieve. And if you're looking for a true drop-top experience, there's no denying that a convertible is the true way to go, and you can get these in cabriolets. But I'm sitting in the interior right now, and yeah, the AC doesn't work. That's more attributed to me being lazy. But the interior design is so elegant. It's so timeless. It really gives off a classic car vibe without feeling all that old school, which is really cool. And I have all the technology I'd really need. I mean, I have a functioning heater. I have a radio. I have a full gauge set. You get an oil pressure gauge, a voltmeter, all things that the Miata doesn't give you. And I don't know why they don't give you that stuff in modern sports cars today. But I'm sitting in the nice, super comfortable leather seats. These aren't the sports seats, which you can get, but they still hold you pretty well in turns. And the one thing I will say about this thing that definitely beats the Miata is cargo room. There's a ton of it in this car. Like, you fold down the rear seats, I fit like, oh man, I think I moved a solid half of my stuff into my apartment in the back of this car, not including my furniture, obviously. But it's pretty freaking practical. And gas mileage sits at 18 city, 25 highway. I definitely don't get that. I probably get around 15 because, you know, I have fun with this car. It's a Porsche. You got to drive it like it's a Porsche. That's the whole flipping point. So let's say you actually are in the market for a sports car and you're really considering getting something that could be a resto project like a 944 versus something more modern like the Miata. The one thing you've got to consider and remember is that with an old car like this, every item is a consumable item. You're gonna be driving along and one day you're gonna blow a gasket of some sort that has been sitting in the engine for 35 years and is worn out. And that's not to say that the car is unreliable. It's not based off of the reliability of the components. It's just over time, everything starts to break down. So like, I had to do a new clutch. Yeah, the rubber center of the old one broke down and I got a new one in, no longer rubber center. Other things like I blew the cam box gasket, holds cam tower, I had to come off to replace that. It's a 35-year-old cork gasket, stuff happens. When you go into a car like this, you need to remember that, yeah, it can be super reliable and it can be a great daily, but there's going to be 35-year-old components that over time are going to break and will require replacement. And that is a big issue that you won't have to deal with a more modern car, at least until you've run it into the ground after like 20 or 30 years. So with that being said, let's park the Porsche and go hop in the Miata. Okay guys, I just pulled out of the driveway in the 2016 Mazda Miata, and the very first thing that you notice by hopping in this car is, oh wow, is this thing light on its toes. You get in this thing and you don't feel any of those 2,300 pounds because this thing just feels so sprightly, so unbelievably light on its toes. It's just ready to go, ready to dance, and ready to change direction as soon as you touch the wheel. Now, the biggest thing that I need to say about the Miata is that it single-handedly has the best manual transmission that you can get on the market. Yeah, the Porsche's transmission is great, but you have relatively long throws. The clutch engage is pretty high. It's fun to shift, but this is just the true essence of a manual. The throws on the shifter are super, super short, super direct. You have a nice engagement feel. You can feel every one of those gears because the shifter goes straight into the transmission. So you have a very positive engagement feel. The clutch has a very short travel and it engages dead in the middle of the pedal, so it's like clinically impossible to stall this thing. Like, you cannot stall it unless you really don't know what you're doing. And just the way that this engine responds, it's a 2-liter Skyactiv engine. It has 155 horsepower, which isn't that much more than the Porsche, but when you pair this gearing with a super light car, it just absolutely cranks. Like, the way you can rev match, listen to this. It's so unbelievably easy to rev match this thing, and that just adds to the fun. Heel-toe downshifts are a breeze because of how this pedal box is spaced. And when you're driving around in this thing, it's so much fun to have fun at legal. It's like easy and fun to have fun at legal speeds. You know, you're not going 30 miles an hour thinking, when can I pass this dude? When can I really ring it out? You don't worry about that. I'm doing 35 right now, and it's an absolute blast. Now, this engine, you may be thinking, it's a little 4-cylinder. Luke, you just hopped out of one slow car just to get into another slow car. Not the case. This thing flies to 60 a lot quicker than you might think, and that's because since it weighs nothing, and with that gearing, you can go to 0 to 60 in 5.8 seconds. That's about 2 and a bit seconds quicker than the Porsche is from 0 to 60, which is pretty insane considering the minute power increases that the Miata has. The other thing that's great about this engine is that it builds power so linearly. When you're in the upper RPM range, it doesn't drop off. You can rev this thing up to 6,700 RPM and have a blast doing so. The newer Miatas, they'll go up to 7,500 RPM and make peak power there with 181 horsepower. Now, that's the great thing about having a super high compression 4-cylinder engine, is because it is so quick to rev, it's so responsive, and this thing sounds pretty good too. It really isn't bad at all, especially with the top down. You get a nice zing from the exhaust, and you're sitting in this interior, right, and you're looking around. You have this gorgeous red paint. They carry some of the red paint accents onto the door panels themselves. You have this really nice cream Napa leather interior, and just the whole dashboard and whole interior just really harks back to British sports cars that this car was essentially designed after, because you have like the nice aluminum accents around the air vents. You have a nice thin steering wheel, the way that you have the color contrasted dash, and just the whole interior vibe of maximizing a small space just really harks back to old British sports cars. It kind of reminds me of an old Austin Healey or a Triumph TR6 in a way. And honestly, I think that's great because it focuses on the essence of driving, not on what driving can be, but on what driving should be. Now, one thing I will say about this car compared to the Porsche is once you really start to push it, yeah, it handles great. It's a fun handling car, but like I said earlier, the limits are quite a bit lower. A lot of that has to come down to the tires. These are much thinner tires. If I remember right, they're 205s or 215s, and the Porsche has much wider tires than that. Also, this is not a club model. This is the Grand Touring model, so it doesn't have the Bilstein shocks, it doesn't have the strut brace, and because of that, there is a decent amount of body roll. Now, the argument behind that is, oh, the body roll really makes you feel more connected to the road and makes the experience more enjoyable, and I understand that to a degree. When you're going at like relatively high speeds, you're driving like 6/10, you can feel the body roll, and it's not so much that you feel like you're really getting thrown all over the place and you don't feel as planted. But once you start pushing it to 8 or 9/10, you really feel like, oh, if this thing was a little bit more planted, I could be going through this quicker, you know? And again, that's not really the point of the Miata. The point of the Miata is to be having a lot of fun at a low speed, and you can make these things go around corners extremely well. They already do stock, but I'm talking like you could really make this thing fly around a turn if you had stiffer suspension on it and stuff like that. But some would argue that would destroy the essence of the Miata. It really all depends on what you're going for. Every single time I get in this car, I have an absolute blast just toying around with it. It's so easy to get the back end out on this thing. You just downshift, get the engine above 3,000 RPM, give it a little flick, back end will always come around, and then you just get a little bit of opposite lockup, like right there. That wasn't an insane drift by any means, but I mean, the back end will step out and you just flick it right back into line, and the car's just like, okay, yeah, you're done drifting, you're done going sideways, oh yeah, we're good, right back in the line. Now, that's something you can't do in the Porsche. The Porsche, you have to be deliberate. If you're trying to get the ass to step out in that thing, you really have to punish it and jab the gas and yank the wheel and be like, do it! You know, this thing, it's just so light on its toes and so quick and easy to react. So, the big differences between the two cars, besides age and the fact that this car, it only has 7,700 miles on it. It's got so much life left in it. Besides those factors, the biggest difference is that the Porsche is a car that is more dailyable, from the factory, and it just has a more focused feel to it. While it's a light car and it's still a stupid amount of fun on back roads, it's more planted, it feels more solid through the turns, and it holds its line more. But as a result of that, when you're just putting around town, it's not as much fun to drive as this Miata is. This Miata is so unbelievably responsive at all speeds. It's so much fun at all speeds, and it doesn't make you feel like, oh, I could go through that turn 10 miles an hour faster next time like you do in the Porsche. The Porsche always eggs you on to go faster. The Miata makes you have fun no matter what you're doing. And if that means that you're sacrificing a little bit of at-the-limit grip and at-the-limit performance, so be it, because this car just simply isn't about that. This car is about getting in it and enjoying all the tangibles of driving, like that amazing gear change, that rev match down into third, rev match into second, flicking it around the turn, feel the whole car rotate, get the ass out, feel a little bit of tire squeal, and then you get that smile on your face. That's what the Miata's about. This thing is just a stupid amount of fun. If I were to pick between the two, I mean, obviously I would choose the Porsche because it's my car, but this Miata, if someone threw me the keys to this thing and said, hey, you get to drive this for a day, or hey, this is yours, I would be so happy, because this is just a totally different experience from the Porsche, and in its own right, it's just as good. I love this car. It is so, so, so good. And I've been saying good a lot. I think that kind of speaks for itself. Thanks again for tuning in to Motor Minds, guys. It's been a hot minute since I've made a video. I've just been busy recently. Life kind of gets away from you sometimes, but we're back in business, bringing out some more content. Find us on social media. We're trying to get our Instagram account back up and popping, so definitely check us out. We have social media on Instagram, Facebook, so definitely go give us a subscribe if you like the videos. Check out some of our other content, and we'll see you next time.